History focuses on World War II's battles and leaders, but children suffered immensely. In ghettos, camps, and institutions, they faced starvation, separation, and loss of innocence, simply for who they were. Some endured hunger in ghettos, others were transported to camps, and some, like in Lebensborn homes, were taken and re-educated. Their untold stories survive in testimonies, diaries, and survivor memories. We highlight 3 forgotten landscapes of World War II, not through graphic horror, but daily survival, coal smoke, latrines, tin dishes, sharing potato peels, protecting siblings. Understanding war's true cost requires listening to the silenced voices of children, not just soldiers and leaders. Our first story takes us to the heart of Warsaw, where a girl named Rivka, age 8, carried a secret beneath her coat, one that meant the difference between life and death. The story begins not with silence, but with sound. Boots hammering against wooden stairs, a latch rattling open, and the acrid smell of coal smoke mixing with the stench of overflowing latrines. These were the sensory borders of childhood in the Warsaw Ghetto, where nearly 500,000 Jews, including tens of thousands of children, were walled into less than 2 square miles. Here, the streets became both playground and prison. Children were not shielded from the collapse of the world. They were thrust into the center of it. With food rations deliberately set at starvation levels, families faced choices no parent should make. Hunger hollowed bellies, and children smaller, quicker, and less likely to be noticed by guards became smugglers. Their tiny bodies slipped through cracks in the wall, squeezed through drains, or wriggled under barbed wire, carrying bread, potatoes, even onion skins in the folds of their coats. The air was thick with coal dust from improvised stoves and the ever-present odor of refuse and sewage, because latrines overflowed in courtyards where too many people crowded into too little space. Children learned to wrinkle their noses, but never escaped the hunger that gnawed harder than any smell. Based on survivor testimonies, we glimpse Rivka, a girl of 8, with eyes too large for her narrow face. One winter morning, she crouched in a corner, clutching a scrap of a potato peel. Her brother, younger by 2 years, stared at her with trembling lips. She could eat it alone and remain hollow, or she could break it in half, handing him survival for 1 more hour. The choice pressed heavier than the brick walls surrounding her. She broke it, half for him, half for her. This moment-to-moment decision whether to share, to hide, or to risk was the rhythm of a child's day. In courtyards, children played games that no longer resembled games. Instead of dolls, they clutched rags. Instead of songs, they mimicked the barking of guards. Instead of laughter, silence often followed the crack of a rifle in the distance. Some children gathered to tell one another stories, fairy tales of forests and rivers they might never see again. For a fleeting hour, imagination served as both shield and weapon. But then came hunger, and cold, and fear. Disease slithered through the ghetto faster than any smuggled food could offset. Typhus, lice, and dysentery all claimed children with merciless speed. Every winter night, carts rolled through the streets, carrying the still bodies of the day's losses. Older children sometimes pulled these carts themselves, the line between survivor and mourner erased. Dawid, 10 years old, remembered the sound of knocking at night. He would bury his head under a pillow, hoping it was only the wind rattling the shutters. But when the knock grew harder, boots, fists, the butt of a rifle, he knew it meant neighbors would be gone by morning. Dawid's father once whispered, "When they come, stay silent, stay still." For a child, silence became both shield and cage. The ghettos broke childhood in quiet ways, as well as violent ones. a chalk-drawn hopscotch square might be smeared by rain, never redrawn. A birthday passed without candles, cake, or even acknowledgement. Every object of innocence disappeared under the weight of survival, and still there were sparks of resistance. A smuggled book read aloud under candlelight, a mother humming a lullaby, though her voice shook with fatigue, an older child teaching a younger one how to tell the difference between a sympathetic passerby and a waiting informant. Even in the darkest alleys, the instinct to teach, to protect, and to remember remained alive. By the summer of 1942, the word deportation began circulating in whispers. For children, it meant little at first, until they saw the cattle cars, the pushing crowds, the families separated at gunpoint. Deportation was spoken of like a shadow, nameless yet heavy. Parents tried to hide their fear, but children caught it in every hurried whisper, every trembling hand. And then, one morning, the announcement echoed through the ghetto. Entire streets were ordered to gather. Dawood, Rivka, and thousands like them faced the square. In the distance, they saw smoke rising from chimneys outside the walls. They did not yet know the meaning. But they would. And as the cattle cars filled with children from Warsaw, another place awaited them, a place where bunks creaked in the night, where tin bowls clattered in endless hunger, and where the word that froze every heart was spoken with chilling clarity: selection. They arrived in the hundreds, each transport packed tight, suffocating with the stench of sweat and fear. Children stumbled out first, clinging to their mothers' skirts. Some carried tin cups, others nothing at all. The ramp at Auschwitz-Birkenau was their first step into a new world, one built on ash and silence. The smell hit them before anything else. Burning coal, latrines overflowing, sickness in the air. Guards shouted in German, dogs barked, and boots struck gravel. A violin played faintly from somewhere, the camp orchestra forced to welcome the doomed. In this chaos stood Rivka, age 8, based on survivor testimony. She gripped her brother's hand so tightly her fingernails left marks. The guard's orders made no sense to her, but she understood one thing. If she let go, she might never see him again. Selections came swiftly. With a glance, an officer pointed left or right. Mothers with infants, the elderly, and the frail were directed to one side. Young men, some women, to another. And children, depending on age, were divided like livestock. And then came the word that froze every child: selection. Some tried to look older, standing taller, puffing their chests. Others shrank behind their parents. For many, it was futile. An outstretched hand, a wave of a stick, sealed their fate. Inside the barracks, survival meant choices. The creak of wooden bunks filled the night, packed with bodies that shifted restlessly. Tin bowls clattered at mealtime, watery soup ladled thin, a crust of bread for the lucky. Jurek, 11 years old, remembered the moment he broke his bread in half. A younger boy stared at him with hollow eyes. Jurek hesitated to share and risk hunger himself, or survive another day. He pushed the crust into the boy's hand. That night, he fainted from weakness, but he lived with one truth. Kindness still flickered, even here. Roll call dragged for hours in freezing wind. Children stood barefoot on icy ground, lips turning blue. Whispers moved through the lines, names of family, prayers under breath. Sometimes a child was struck for speaking. Sometimes silence was the only shield. In Block 16, where children were crammed, lice crawled across skin. The air reeked of sickness and coal smoke. Dawood, 9, whispered his sister's name at night, a name now forbidden. When a capo overheard, he was beaten. His sister, lying beside him, pressed her body against his to shield him from the next blow. It was a small choice, but one that kept them human. Then came the moments when doors opened and names were read. Children were led out in groups, told they were moving to a shower. Some resisted, clutching at wooden posts, screaming. Others, numb, walked silently. For most, there was no return. Smoke curled into the sky above Birkenau. Ash drifted like grey snow across the camp. Children saw it, smelled it, even if they did not understand it. They called it the Black Snow. Yet not all were lost. A few were hidden by prisoners, tucked into barracks, disguised as older or smuggled into labor groups. These flickers of defiance meant survival for some. In Auschwitz, death was everywhere, but so was choice, even if choice was reduced to a crumb of bread, a whispered name, or holding a sibling's hand a moment longer. For children, survival was measured not in years, but in hours. After liberation, some of these children were found wandering the barracks, too weak to speak their own names. Relief workers wrote numbers on slips of paper and tied them around their necks. To piece together who they were became a mission that lasted decades. Some were reunited. Many were never traced. In Auschwitz, childhood was measured in hours, in crumbs, in the faintest flicker of resistance. But there was another place, a camp that, on the surface, looked different. A place of painted walls, of concerts, of staged smiles. Yet behind the illusion, children faced a cruelty just as devastating. Not every child under Nazi rule was marked for the camps. Some were chosen for something else, a life rewritten. The Lebensborn program, created by Himmler in 1935, was designed to engineer the future. On the surface, these homes looked like sanctuaries with painted walls, nurseries, tidy beds lined in rows. But their true purpose was chilling, to breed, absorb, and erase. These houses stretched across Germany, Austria, and the occupied lands. In Norway, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, children vanished. Some were born to German women encouraged to produce racially pure babies for the Reich. Others kidnapped. One such child was Jurek, 6 years old, taken from his village outside Krakow. Based on testimony, he remembered the smell of his mother's bread still warm in the oven. By nightfall, he was on a truck, pressed against strangers. By the week's end, he had no name. In his new papers, he was Jürgen. The process was methodical. Hair color, eye shade, and the slope of the nose were measured with calipers. If a child fit the criteria, their past was stripped away. Language was forbidden. Whispering a Polish lullaby or answering in Czech could earn a slap or worse. Children learned to speak German quickly, not by choice, but by survival. David, age 8, once muttered a Hebrew prayer at night. A nurse overheard. The next day, he stood in the hallway as other children were forced to mock him. He never spoke Hebrew again. Daily life seemed clean, even orderly. Warm meals, baths scented with soap, neatly folded clothes. But the cruelty was in erasure. Memories had to be buried. A child who resisted and clung to a name or a song was marked as disobedient. And sometimes they simply disappeared. Once a month, black cars pulled up outside. Officers walked the halls, pointing at children. Some were taken into German foster families, dressed in Sunday clothes, paraded as orphans of war. Others, less suitable, were led away. Few ever returned. For the children, choices were silent rebellions. Share a secret with another. My real name is Rivka. Hide a pebble from your village road, humming a forbidden tune while scrubbing floors. Each act is a flicker of identity against the machine of assimilation. In a home in Bavaria, a girl named Lieselotte hid scraps of Polish words in the margins of her school notebook. When discovered, she was forced to wash floors for weeks, but she whispered them to herself at night. so she would not forget who she was. Some children grew attached to their foster families, not knowing they had been stolen. Others lived in a fog of fear, punished into forgetting. Decades later, many would speak of the moment their mothers' faces grew dim, until they could no longer recall them at all. The Lebensborn homes did not murder the body. They murdered the past. They produced a generation of children who survived, but as strangers to themselves. To live meant to lose. After the war, tracing these children became a desperate mission. International agencies, the Red Cross, and families searched. Some were found, returned across borders in awkward reunions. Others refused by then. They knew only their German names, and many were never identified at all. Today, their stories remind us, war does not only kill, it steals. The story of children in Nazi Europe is not only a story of suffering, it is a story of stolen time, stolen identity, and stolen laughter. From the ghettos of Warsaw, where hunger hunted them daily, to the barracks of Auschwitz, where survival itself was a defiance, to the orphanages where memory was stripped from their lips, leaving them strangers to themselves. These were not soldiers. They were not enemies. They were children. And yet, in them, the cruelty of the Reich revealed its deepest truth, that tyranny fears innocence, because innocence cannot be controlled. Like and share this video. The stories shared within it serve as a poignant reminder that war not only claims lives, but also steals childhoods. By remembering these accounts, we are not merely recounting atrocities, but striving to restore dignity to voices that were once silenced.